Axes drip with blood not of enemies but of allies. The gates of Constantinople swing wide, not to drive back an invasion but to welcome one. The very men sworn to protect the emperor the famed Varangian Guard have turned. For centuries, these Viking warriors were the iron wall of Byzantium, the emperor's shield. But in this alternate world, they betray him, and the consequences shake the medieval world to its core. To understand how shocking this is, let's step back into real history. The Varangian Guard began in the late 10th century when Byzantine Emperor Basil II hired warriors from the North Norsemen, Rus, and later Anglo-Saxons who had fled after the Norman conquest. Fierce, loyal, and bound not by local politics but by their oath to the emperor, they became the most trusted soldiers in Byzantium. While generals and nobles schemed, the Varangians stood by the throne, famous for their heavy axes and unbreakable discipline. For centuries, they fought in every major battle of the empire, from Sicily to Anatolia. In the chaos of palace intrigue, they were the one constant, but what if that oath broke? What if the Varangians, tired of serving foreign emperors, chose power for themselves? Or worse, sold their loyalty to the highest bidder? Imagine Constantinople in the 11th century, glittering with mosaics and domes, its streets filled with traders from every corner of the known world. And then picture the Varangian Guard, instead of standing guard at the palace, marching through those same streets with axes raised not to defend but to destroy. Here's how it might unfold. It is the year 1071, a fateful one for Byzantium. In our history, the empire suffers a crushing defeat at the Battle of Manzikert against the Seljuk Turks, losing much of Anatolia. Morale is low. Factions squabble. The emperor, Romanos IV, is captured. In this alternate world, the Varangians see an opportunity. Instead of defending the emperor upon his return, they strike a deal with Byzantine nobles who want him gone. One night, the palace gates are opened not to loyal courtiers, but to rebels. The Varangians, the emperor's last line of defense, cut him down themselves. The betrayal shocks the empire. Word spreads quickly: if even the emperor's most loyal guard can turn, then no one is safe. Constantinople falls into chaos. Rival claimants to the throne scramble for power, each trying to hire what remains of the guard to their side. But the Varangians, no longer loyal to Byzantium, take matters further. They throw open the city's gates to the empire's greatest enemy, the Seljuk Turks. Think of the human cost. In real history, Constantinople stood for centuries more, its walls unbroken until 1204 and finally 1453, but here the city is sacked in the late 11th century. Citizens flee in panic as fires consume the Hagia Sophia. Merchants from Venice and Genoa, who once thrived in its markets, see their fortunes vanish overnight. A mother carrying her child rushes through the streets, only to be caught in the tide of panicked thousands trying to escape. An old priest watches in horror as sacred relics are smashed, not by outsiders storming the walls, but by the very guards once sworn to protect them. The ripple effects spread like wildfire. Without Constantinople standing as a Christian bulwark in the east, Europe faces the Turks much sooner. The Crusades, instead of beginning in 1096 with a call to liberate Jerusalem, may begin earlier as horrified Europeans rally to save what remains of Byzantium or to avenge it. Pope Urban II's famous speech might not call for a march to the Holy Land, but to reclaim Constantinople itself. This changes the entire nature of medieval history. A crusade to save Byzantium instead of Jerusalem reshapes the focus of Christian Europe. The Holy City may remain under Muslim control for centuries, while the might of knights and kings pours into Anatolia. France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire might carve out new kingdoms not in the Levant but on the ruins of the Byzantine Empire. Instead of crusader states in Antioch and Jerusalem, we could see crusader states in Thrace, Macedonia, or even Athens. The Islamic world, too, feels the shift. In our history, the Seljuks rise to power but face centuries of struggle against Byzantium. Here, with Constantinople captured early, their empire becomes far more dominant. Anatolia is secured completely centuries before the Ottomans. Islamic culture, architecture, and language spread deeper into Europe. By the 12th century, cities like Thessaloniki could be Muslim strongholds. The line between Christendom and Islam moves far westward, perhaps as close as the Adriatic. And what about the Varangians themselves? In real history, they were remembered as the emperor's bodyguards, noble and loyal. In this alternate timeline, they are remembered as traitors. Their legacy is not of honor but of greed. Yet their betrayal could also reshape the Viking world. If they seize control of Constantinople themselves, they might establish a Varangian dynasty. Picture a Viking emperor ruling from the palaces of Byzantium, his court blending Norse traditions with Byzantine splendor. The sagas of Iceland would tell not of faraway raids, but of kings sitting upon the throne of the East. Let's zoom in on the ordinary lives changed. In England, after 1066, many Anglo-Saxon warriors fled to join the Varangians. In this timeline, they don't serve as loyal mercenaries, they become part of a betrayal that shatters an empire. An English exile named Edric, who in our history might have guarded the emperor's throne, here stands in the burning Hagia Sophia, torn between regret and survival. His descendants, instead of blending into Byzantine society, may rule it as conquerors. Meanwhile, a Greek merchant in Constantinople, who once trusted the guard to defend his city, watches as his livelihood burns. His children are forced into exile, carrying only fragments of Byzantine culture into Western Europe. Perhaps these refugees bring with them knowledge, art, and manuscripts that spark new bursts of learning in Italy and France centuries earlier than the Renaissance. Out of destruction comes unintended rebirth. Globally, the loss of Byzantium a full 350 years before its fall to the Ottomans reshaped trade. Constantinople, the key link between East and West, is now under foreign control. Venice and Genoa lose access to its markets, forcing them to explore new routes sooner. The Age of Discovery, instead of beginning in the 15th century, could begin in the 12th or 13th. Imagine European ships sailing earlier, driven not by Ottoman pressure but by Seljuk control of Constantinople centuries before. Columbus might never sail in 1490 to his equivalent could sail in 1250. The New World might be discovered to centuries early. This alternate history also shifts the balance of Christianity itself. Without Byzantium, the Eastern Orthodox Church collapses. Rome gains dominance far earlier as the only surviving Christian center of power. The Great Schism of 1054, instead of creating two strong Christian traditions, leaves orthodoxy crushed within a generation. Europe's spiritual map tilts decisively toward Catholicism, with massive consequences for culture, politics, and the future of the Church. And yet, imagine the symbolic power. The empire that once stood as the last echo of Rome, betrayed not by enemies, but by its own guardians. It has a story that poets and chroniclers across Europe and the Islamic world would never tire of retelling. The fall of Constantinople, not in 1204 or 1453, but in 1071, by the hands of the Varangians. Would the world be richer or poorer for this? On one hand, Byzantine art, law, and culture vanish earlier, lost to flames and conquest. On the other, the acceleration of trade, exploration, and cultural exchange might bring parts of the modern world sooner. Perhaps the Renaissance begins centuries early. Perhaps European colonization begins before Asia is ready. Perhaps the entire course of modernity is pulled forward. But one thing is clear, the betrayal of the Varangian Guard, the most loyal soldiers of their age, would echo through history as one of the greatest acts of treachery the world had ever seen. So, what do you think? Would a Varangian betrayal have destroyed Europe's last link to Rome too early, or would it have sped up history in ways we can barely imagine? Drop your thoughts below, and if you're enjoying these flips through time, subscribe to Sheriff Reactions, hit that bell, and join us every day as we explore not just what happened, but what could have happened.